In this section, I would like to talk about mechanics, and from that point, I want to take you to the differences between statics and dynamics. Mechanics, based on the definition, is when forces apply to a body, an object, the reaction of the object, and a study of the reaction of the object in respect to those forces called mechanics. This body, this object could be in a very small scale, or it could be a gigantic, enormous size structures, tower, or perhaps a bridge. So let me go a little further down and break down the actual mechanics to three subcategories. One part is a rigid body. The rigid body, the definition is that objects that when you apply the force, they do not deform and they maintain their shape. So in a sense, they are in elastic region. And from that point, it goes to statics and dynamics, which I talk in more detail. The next one is deformable bodies, bodies that when you apply the force, they actually change their shape. Give an example: when you are forging a red hot metal, iron, it changes the form, or when you bend a pipe, the shape is changed. And last but not least, we talk about the fluids. And fluids are in two different kinds. One is compressible fluids, and the other one is incompressible fluids. Mostly, we are dealing with this part at this level, and especially we talk about the statics. So static means that the object is in equilibrium with all the forces and there is no motion involved. That's a good kind of example here, the difference between statics and dynamics. Let's go a little more in detail. So I allow you to read this small few paragraphs, and then we talk in more detail. So obviously you realize that in statics, buildings, bridges, tables, chairs, so the beauty is that they are in a steady state and they don't move. And if anything that's supposed to be in a statical equilibrium, it moves, something is drastically wrong. So a building only moves when it's collapsing or under perhaps seismic forces. Rather than that, it has to be steady. On the other hand, we have dynamics, and the dynamics is obviously the object is moving: cars, airplanes, trains, cannonball, and so on. So it is meant to be in motion, and still we have to study all the forces applied to the object. What happens when an object that's supposed to be in a static is not in equilibrium? Obviously, the position of the object changes, and this would be catastrophic. I have an interesting example. Imagine someone drove his or her car into the lake and they call upon a towing truck. The towing truck came and they want to lift the car out of the water. So one thing you should notice is that this particular towing truck driver, the position obviously it's kind of like a almost parallel or very small angle to the edge. It's not ideal. Later on, maybe you learn that this force here, which is the weight of the car, it creates a moment around the point of stability and causes perhaps to tip this towing truck, and this actually happens. Well, they bring a bigger towing truck, but the same mistake. And obviously, when you want to take the smaller car, it should be okay. But when it comes to taking the smaller towing truck out of the water, a disaster happens. This is a very simple example of knowing the static rules and equation of equilibriums can save us out of lots of trouble. Just let me just have a little bit of more scientific explanation. This is the towing truck, and you can see that this arm here create a moment and cause the tipping of this towing truck. So the weight mostly about here is the engine. This should have been counteracted the weight of the car that went to the lake. It would have been much better here if this would have been happened. So in that case, about this point, you have one moment with this arm, and there would be one moment of this arm, and because here is the engine and has lots of weight, most probably the tipping would have not happened. This is just an example. In order to understand statics, so you have to understand forces, and by knowing statics and forces and getting completely familiar, then you can go to next level and start to understand dynamics, which is more complex. I hope this explains the difference between statics and dynamics.